Hello everyone, this is Sean Eubanks with STRAINWISE Consulting. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, May 11th, Thursday at noon Mountain Time. We have an outstanding presentation today. I hope it's very informative. We're going to be talking all about Arkansas and all the exciting things that are happening there. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. Quick housekeeping note, go ahead and submit your questions right there on the webinar. Those of you listening, you can just submit your questions right there, and as they pop up, I'll either acknowledge them there or I'll hold them to the end to the question and answering period. So I want to welcome all of you, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so Arkansas, how to construct a winning cannabis application. I'm your host, Sean Eubanks. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here for STRAINWISE Consulting. And you are in the right place. The cannabis industry is becoming more and more attractive to investors due to the high growth rates. With potentially large profits to be made, savvy investors are continually looking for new ways to capitalize on the growth of the legal cannabis marketplace. All right, so STRAINWISE Consulting, just a quick overview on us and why you should be tuning in and why we're here and what authority, frankly, do we have to be giving advice and consulting in the industry. We are the most sought-after consulting company for applications and management contracts in the cannabis industry. We consulted on the very first recreational license in the world. In fact, we consulted on 7 of the first 10. We have nearly 100% success rate on applications submitted, and we have over 200 applications that we've worked on, submitted, and won. We have 9 branded dispensaries throughout the state of Colorado. We have over 100,000 square feet of cultivation space, and we are, of course, among the top 5 top marijuana companies in the state of Colorado. Sorry, quickly, I'll go ahead and adjust this volume. I'm getting a notice that the volume is pretty loud, so hang in there, guys. I will get that adjusted down a little bit. Hope that is better. All right, so Forbes has listed us as among the top 50 publicly traded marijuana companies in the space. We did consult the very first vertically integrated Native American tribe selling cannabis in the United States. So you're in the right spot. I do want to do a quick plug for Blunt Business Radio. We are now live on iTunes. We have that up and going now. You can go look through several of the past episodes there. We're as well now on iHeartRadio. So Blunt Business is the podcast, the Cannabis Business Podcast for STRAINWISE Consulting. We having a lot of great guests. We had a guy yesterday on, young whippersnapper, very successful youngster here in the state of Colorado, took $300, turned that into several $100,000 in revenue, has an expanding business, and is just doing very, very well, one of the bright future stars of the industry. So those are kind of the things that we talk about on the Blunt Business Radio Network, and you are welcome to join us. And it, of course, is hosted by Cannabis Radio, and they do a phenomenal job and just have a tremendous platform. All right, so getting into Arkansas. So first things first, 4 things to be grateful for. HB 1058. HB means House Bill, which is different than House Party. If you have House bills are done on the legislative floor, and House parties are something that you would ask your parents if you could do that or not. So totally different, not to be confused there. The fun part here is that HB 1058 strikes language requiring doctors to weigh benefits and risk of medical marijuana when certifying that a patient has a qualifying medical condition. Also specifies that medical marijuana records are not federally protected but still confidential, and that was signed into law as Act 5. So that's wonderful. That is an indication. HB 1058 is an indication that it's a lot less strenuous on doctors moving forward. Very good news for the state of Arkansas. The second thing that we should be grateful for, HB 1298 requires licenses for dispensaries or cultivation facilities be issued to the individual people, not business or groups. So it also authorizes the transfer of dispensaries of cultivation license that was approved by the House, headed to the Senate. That's great news. There's a lot of out-of-state groups that are coming into Arkansas. We saw this in Pennsylvania. We saw it in Maryland, Illinois, Pennsylvania. We're seeing it in Ohio. This is just typical. You'll have out-of-state groups that are coming in, and this is a little bit of a nod towards Arkansas and making sure you're issuing to individual people, and then, of course, those individual people are vetted, and that keeps it very Arkansas-friendly, which is great. All right, HB 1369 is the third thing to be grateful for. This requires that tax revenues from medical marijuana to first repay the state for the program's administrative and enforcement. Any excess will go to the state's general revenue fund. why I think that's a good thing is because we ran into this in the state of Colorado. You want to make sure that these organizations, these programs, and you have 3 governing bodies basically that we'll get into that are going to be going to have the oversight here. But you want to make sure that they're properly funded. We ran into that in the Marijuana Enforcement Division in Colorado, some issues there, and that slows down, of course, the application process and things like that when they're struggling to make payroll and do basic government functions. So this drops the requirement that half of the tax revenue goes towards vocational and technical training. This is also good. When you have the government stepping in and starting to allocate and starting to dictate, funding and things like that are based on ideology, on vocational, technical training, things like that, the reality on the ground is that office needs to be well funded. So I'm happy about that just from the business standpoint, just to make sure that works. This was approved by the House and it was assigned to the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee. All right, so the 4th reason to be excited and something to be grateful for here in the state of Arkansas is HB 1402. This allows our Arkansas Department of Health to reschedule marijuana if the federal government does so first. Wonderful. This is signed into law as an Act 440. When amending these laws and getting into state constitution, things like that are difficult, and it's really, really cool because if at the federal level it is rescheduled, then automatically filters down in the state of Arkansas, which people would naturally want, but the point is that barrier to get that done is lowered, so that is great. Okay, so Arkansas, moving on, how to construct a winning cannabis application. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff over the next hour. I want you guys, if you can, just go ahead and take notes. I don't see any questions popping up so far. I hope everyone can hear me, and I hope it's working all right because I've gotten a couple indications that the sound was actually too loud. So hopefully that adjustment's been made and everything is going smoothly. All right, so jumping into here. The first thing, elements of the application package. The first thing that we're going to have is the business plan. And the second thing after that is going to be the operations plan, and then we'll go into quality assurance plan, and then we'll talk about the security plan. Then after that, we'll get into the financial plan. So inside these, this is great. Five sectors here, that's great. But inside these are around, and I'm going to draw on some experience from Ohio and Pennsylvania. Around these are around 20 narratives, okay? So inside all this business plan, operations, quality, security, financial, you're going to have narratives kind of like diversity plan, operational timetable, employee qualifications, duties, responsibilities, roles. You'll have security and surveillance. You'll have transportation plan. You'll have medical marijuana storage plan. You'll have a labeling plan, inventory management plan, waste management plan, diversion prevention plan, okay, which is, of course, keeping everything in-house and making sure that things aren't leaking out the back door. Very important to community, very important to the optics, and very important, obviously, to politicians. Diversion prevention plan, underneath that, you've got pesticide plan, cultivation plan, nutrient management plan. All those things are necessary. Going further, inside this, you'll have processing extraction plan, you'll have maintaining a sanitary facility plan, record-keeping plan, business history and capacity to operate. Very, very important. They're asking for that specifically. It's written into the bills. They're going to be telling you that's exactly what we're looking for. All of the indications so far is your capacity to operate is very, very important, or who you choose as an operator is very important. Capital requirements are next, build-out plan, community impact plan. I'll stop there. We haven't even talked about employee management, standard operating procedures, the actual function of the business we haven't even gotten into. I just want to paint the picture for you that you're looking at 20 different narratives at a minimum inside of all of these. So very, very important that we pay attention to that. So we'll do a deep dive into it. Okay, so licensing first. So how many licenses is the Medical Marijuana Commission going to issue? Well, look, for the cultivation side, there's going to be a minimum of 4. Indications are that there are 5, but no more than 8. So that's what's written in. Minimum of 4, no more than 8. It's understood there are going to be 5. These 5 are going to be in 5 geographic subdivisions that will be released where those will be. And then for dispensaries, we'll have at least 20, but no more than 40. We're looking at 28 there. Okay, so you will have identified 8 geographic zones. Your dispensary license will only be valid in that zone, okay? So listen, I want to talk for a second about this. Historically speaking, we've had other states, other clients that want to deliberately focus on a specific geographic area. area. And I believe that's actually an error. That might have been a Freudian slip there. That is an error. And we found out that those people that try to do that, you actually find yourself being in a more competitive market. So it was the opposite, especially in Pennsylvania. We ran into that. We're like, wow, we didn't expect, our client was dialed in, very successful, very, very connected, and wanted to be in a certain area because of because of a low competition, frankly, in that area, which is fine, good strategy, but just be mindful that that doesn't always work out. We have experience of that actually not being the case. Doesn't mean you don't get the license. We still win, but the idea there is that you don't have an advantage. So if you select a non-competitive geographic area, be prepared to do business there. Don't be doing it just because it seems to be low-hanging fruit and an easy way in, or because your cousin is the is prominent there, or whatever the case may be. So just understand that you cannot move your dispensary license, dispensary only, right? You cannot move the dispensary license to another zone. Okay, so now that's worth noting, and I hope that everyone's paying attention to that. So as we go into the licensing, we know that you've got that strategy in place. You're going to go into the actual area you want to, and now as we dive a little bit further, you're going to say, okay, dispensary needs. You're going to have a surety bond of $200,000 and then $100,000 in assets. Keep in mind, under licensing, guys, make a note, delivery services are also available. This is wonderful. This should be my fifth thing to be excited about Arkansas about. This is tremendous. This goes on in California. It is an incredible service because you, in the state of California now, with the new regulations, you have to be tied to a retail location that's come about. But they've enjoyed several years of just of doing that. And then I know a lot of people who have gotten their license very inexpensive, very easy to do for just a delivery service in California. So that works out wonderfully. The fact that Arkansas is already giving a nod to delivery service is really, really forward thinking. Just another big surprise out of a red state. Just a tremendous opportunity for those of you in the state of Arkansas. All right, so now we go on to setback requirements for dispensaries. You need to be 1,500 feet from public and private schools, daycare, church. These are considered special use. That's what we call it. This is pretty typical. 1,500 feet is actually, for it to be a blanket sweep like this, normally you'll have different, a park might be 600 feet, daycare might be 1,000, church might be 1,000. In this case, they just kind of did through the 1,500 feet from public and private schools, daycare, and all those things. Now, there's a little bit of leeway here. We definitely always lean towards compliance. In Arkansas, there's not going to be a rush and a massive real estate drive up and issues that you might happen like in a state like California. So it's not going to be so crowded, and you'll be able to find properties. So it's not a big deal there. To that point, go ahead and just don't entertain properties that aren't 1,500 feet. I mean, don't mess with it. And then there's no need to do that. There's not going to be that urgency there. And so just follow those. There are also, like, for example, if you sign a lease and there's not a, say like an after-school tutoring center there, and they sign the lease after you're going to have a little bit of a defense there. But just kind of be aware of what's going on and err to the side of caution. Keep in mind, politicians want this thing to go really well. They don't want any issues. And in Arkansas, you've got a history of really, really, really strict possession laws. So culturally, people need to come around to this and understand that it's something that's illegal. There'll be a little bit of a gap there with that. You're also going to be dealing with the fact that you have a community service issue and a community awareness issue and an education piece. So just steer clear of all of these what we will call sensitive use, guys. That includes all public schools, daycare, churches, all those things. All right. Also includes parks, guys. Okay. FYI, you also need to make sure that the city, town, or county in which the dispensary is going to be located has not enacted zoning restrictions against cannabis-related businesses. This is where I find that most of our clients will spin their wheels, because what they have to do is they have to call a real estate agent, and that real estate agent, of course, has zero cannabis experience. The other thing is this real estate agent has, if they're good, they have experience of closing a lot of deals, and they're not used to this learning curve and frankly, all of the boxes that need to be checked in the marijuana space. So you need to be working with people who are in the cannabis space and know what's happening. What we do internally is we'll take the property from the real estate agent, we will look at it, we'll vet it ourselves, and then we'll send it back, we'll send the LOI to them as soon as we know. But I just want to say you can't divorce yourself from your own due diligence here, and you need to be working with somebody that can do that. So if you can't just call a real estate agent and say, look, you need to be 1,500 feet from a public school. They're not going to know what that means. Is that as a crow flies? Is it is it property line to property line? Is it path of travel? Right? There's different things, and also you just got to be mindful of the zoning for this. The last thing you want to do is sign a lease, put down a deposit, and not be able to move forward. And obviously, you don't want to purchase a building that you can't use. All right, so setbacks requirement for cultivation now. Cultivation a little bit different. 3,000 feet, guys, that may sound like a long way away. That's not a big deal at all. You just want to be 3,000 feet, and there's a blanket statement again there from all the places that are sensitive use. So 1,500 feet for dispensaries, 3,000 feet for cultivation. Okay, 1 second here. I see that's 1,500 feet to the main entrance. Cody, thanks for your question. That's 1,500 feet to the main entrance. Yes, that is correct. So Cody's question is, that's 1,500 feet to the main entrance. Yes, it's 1,500 feet to the main entrance, front door of the facility. Yep. No worries, Cody. Thanks for the question, buddy. We'll move on. Okay, so review process. Step one is preliminary approval. So you'll have a preliminary approval first. This is not uncommon. A lot of states do it. And then next is going to be step two. You'll do a secondary background, and then that's when your funds are due. So for cultivation, that's when you'll send in your $100,000, which is the fee for you once you've won that license. And then you'll do a $500,000 security bond, not uncommon and not very expensive, not a big deal. But the problem is here you'll have 7 days to comply. So, for example, if we're writing the application for you, we're going to address all these things up front, make sure that we're going to talk about sourcing funds and make sure that's covered. But if you're not using a consultant for that, understand that basically as soon as they give you the license, you have 7 days to turn over this capital. So if the capital is tied up in real estate, which we would obviously stop you at that point, we would find a more liquid source, or we would actually, in some instances, actually help you, introduce you to an investor that can help fund your deal that way. But what a tragedy it would be to go through step one, you think you're clear, and then you do have the funds, but you just don't have them liquid, and you can't get them divested basically in 7 days. So watch out for that. Okay, next up is the business plan. So the first thing you're going to be talking about here on the business plan is your experience in the business. Arkansas is calling specifically for your experience in a couple of different things. They want to talk about your horticultural experience and your agricultural experience. We'll get to that in a minute. But they want to know, the crux of their question is, who is going to operate, right? Who are we giving a license to? Because if we're giving a license to someone that is very successful in other industries, who's going to be manning this ship, right? Who's going to be watching this this program take place? Because the regulators, all they care about is truly they want you to be successful, but they're going to give a license to someone that has an operating experience or has consulting, that is an operator is going to come in and do that. With STRAINWISE Consulting, when we offer this to people, we think it strengthens the application. This is why I personally believe we win so often, is because we're listed as the operator. So what it does, it takes a lot of the pressure off of the owners. The owners are going to be there. That's who's providing the capital. That's who is stepping in. That's their history, and their history of success is what gets their foot in the door. And then the operator is what the regulator is going to look at and lean on and go, oh, okay, that's who's doing that. So if you got one application with an operator on it, and you got another application with no operator on it, the regulator isn't discriminating here. They're simply saying, look, this person with the operator who's had the foresight to hire a consultant, that person gets the license. So look for that. That's just pretty common. Okay. Next up, after the business plan, we dive into step one for operations and step two for operations, and then for quality assurance, step 1 and step 2 as well. So there'll be a couple of different reviews of this. Both the operations plan, it's robust. There's an operational timetable in there. There's a lot of employee qualifications, duties, responsibilities. You've got security and surveillance. You got transportation plan, inventory management, waste management. You got diversion. That's pesticide, cultivation, nutrient management plans. You have all these things are going to be in the actual. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of operating and running this business. So very straightforward stuff on our end, but operations here, this includes standard operating procedures, and so you're going to have those in all of your all of those different narratives are going to be addressed here. You got bookkeeping plan, business history, all those things are going to be in there. I alluded to it a second ago. We'll talk about it further, but you've got 3 governing bodies, and so the operation plan is going to satisfy all 3 of those. Quality assurance plan. Easily done. You know, what they're concerned about. Let's take a 30,000-foot view real quick. When politicians write these laws, they're concerned about a couple of things. They don't want kids using cannabis, right? They want to make sure that that pesticides and things are appropriate, different levels. So you can expect some form of testing at this point. And our advice is to go ahead and get and front run the testing. In Colorado, we test for a reason to market, right? Everyone wants to talk about yield and consumption, and that's important to the Colorado consumer. The Colorado consumer is in a mature market. They have access to both medical and recreational, so there's a lot going on there that that will drive the Colorado consumer in a different direction. But in other states, you'll have testing that will drive, you know, the fact that people want pesticide free, or they want to know what's in that. So there's different reasons to test for it. But in this instance, our quality assurance plan will talk about testing because we want to lead these regulators to say, hey, even in case they hadn't thought about this, this should be on their radar. So you have step 1 and step 2 of the assurance plan. Security plan is going to talk a lot about really security and surveillance, number 1. So if you're at a cultivation center, there's going to be entrances and exits. You're going to have employees. If it's a well-designed center, like we're doing across the country, I see most of the plans and most of the vendors that have jumped into this space are doing a fantastic job of laying out these facilities. So there's a lot of services that can do that. We do it. We've built out so many here in Colorado. We know the ins and outs of it, and we can share with you our experience on that. But bottom line there is that on the cultivation center and around the security, you're going to get a lot of this stuff's going to be mandated. You'll figure it out and be able to go through that. But you're going to really be looking at diversion, which considers what can be moving out the back door, but what your employees can be taking with them. Just a quick word about employees. You got to understand a lot of them are coming from, if they have success, they're coming from an agricultural background. If they don't, some of them are coming from a gray area where they might have been, you know, cannabis wasn't legal, but they've been growing for a lot of years. So, and they're not making a lot of money at the cultivation level, and it's very, very hard work. So it's natural to protect yourself against your employees who are going to be sending product at the back door. Not only do you lose money at that point, but you also lose your license, right? And so in this state, you're going to have there's always an example that's going to be made. So politicians are going to make examples, but understand this is true, and I know this is a blanket statement, but they want the program to succeed, and they want to weed out all of the bad actors. So you got to watch out for that. All right, financial plan. This is where it's very important to. You can pull up, you've got financial projections, you got pro formas, you got different levels here. But what the regulators want to see from you on a financial plan is they want to see that you've got enough in reserve. And so what we will generally guide a client to do is a percentage of the amount of capital. So number 1, we'll lay out everything that they're going to spend that first year, and including the run rate. And the run rate is basically how long it takes for them to get plants in the ground until the first harvest, right? So you've got a 4-month run rate at that point. And so what we're doing there is showing all of this, and we're going to prove to this regulator in a very simple, straightforward way that why you're going to be an ongoing concern and why you've prepared for it. All right. Okay. So, sorry guys, I'm looking at questions coming in as well, and looking at the screen. So, moving forward here, we will get to that in a second, guys. Okay, so Arkansas, executive summary. We are looking at the financial plan. We drop into executive summary. So not unlike a standard business plan, but what else is in it? So we have the executive summary. We're going to have your background. So it's what do you aim to do? We have one licenses for people who don't have a tremendous amount of business experience. Do not let this scare you off. However, if you lack the business experience in general is one thing, but nothing related to horticulture, agriculture, anything along the lines that's going to translate well into the cannabis industry, you have to make it up with your other board members or with an operator that's going to come in and handle things for you. So you can solve your problem of your lack of business experience by bringing in the right operator, right? That's the first thing you can do. So the second step of the executive summary, you're going to talk about purpose. So you're doing analysis and proposed business model. We do a full business model. We charge $10,000 for it. It is normally done in the form of a combination of a robust, very, very intense financial business plan and its / pitch book. So we've helped our clients raise more than $16 million doing this. And so at this point, we would plug in this business model. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but it talks about, it really lays out what's going to happen and the profit potential there. We normally will do this business plan outside of an application, and we'll do it for $10,000 because it's typically going to help you raise capital. And so that's what we're putting together. We designed it to educate regulators on the application side of things and also educate people who aren't familiar with the industry. So if you're just getting into cannabis and you have an investor and he's interested or she's interested, but you don't know how to bridge that gap between, we think it's a good opportunity. There's some kind of green rush. We're hearing $20 billion and we're seeing $7 billion as the current industry. And so we're excited about it, but bridge the gap for us. That's what that business plan will do. Excuse me. That's what will happen there. So we will plug that in at this point. So the proposed analysis business model here, regulators are going to be looking at that closely. The next part of the executive summary is called approach taken. So this is digging into whose experience you're relying on. It's real simple. What operator? Who's going to come in and run this? Because if you got a 4-month run rate and they're going to give 5 cultivation licenses, and 3 of those companies have operators, which means the plants are going to go on the ground. Things are going to go off without a hitch. It's going to be a smooth operation, and now you're going to have 3 out of the 5 that are up and running, which means those 3 now, because 2 didn't use operators, they're stumbling. Maybe their crop fails and they're out of business at that point. That's something that we see quite often. Typically how this will flow is you'll have a bunch of people apply for a cultivation license. They'll start to look at it. They haven't done the due diligence up front. They haven't talked to a consultant about what's the potential here. They don't know how much capital they need. They just start writing big checks. Things start to happen, and rumors start to go, because these are small communities of people. Rumors start to happen that, hey, so-and-so's cultivation, they're gonna get out when they get their license. And so the process of that's looked at. But so that's the reality. Maybe they get out. Maybe someone buys them out. Maybe they don't. But the other 3 that are actually up and operational, now they've got a much larger share of the market. So if they're doing it right, they actually get a massive boost to their financials and their ROI, and everybody's happy. So hopefully you're the 3 and not the 2. And hopefully by now, a state like Arkansas, everyone sees the opportunity and how friendly, frankly, the regulators have been, and how open this program is, and everybody gets on board, and the 5 go off like gangbusters, and everybody's rocking and rolling, and then they open it up again to more cultivation centers. So, all right, next up is the assessment summary. So we'll talk about funding in this part. We'll talk about distribution of profits, total capital investment needed. You're going to predict cash flow and tax revenues. Tax revenues are very important. Remember, for those of you who are listening the first time, remember cultivation, you have a lot of write-offs because of the production side of things. You can write off the production of marijuana, right? And on the retail side is the opposite. You're still under 280E, but you're at this point you have a massive let's just call it a tax, because you don't have the write-offs that you would have. And so when you sell marijuana at the retail level, you're taxed differently than when you cultivate marijuana at the production level. So don't want to dive too much into that because we're not doing a tax deal right now. But just take note of that if this is the first time you're hearing it. Shoot me an email or something. We could talk about it further. All right, recommendations. So from this point, after this, we're going to do recommendations, which means in Arkansas, we're going to have a recommendation of we're going to build out the entire facility for you and get you rocking and rolling on the cultivation side. On the retail side, we're going to go ahead and get you ready to go too. There's not multiple phases needed in either one of them. An example of why multiple phases might be used for those of you who are looking on the webinar, the example of the multiple phases might be if we want to start small because of market demand, certain restrictions that might happen. So if flowers aren't allowed, or you haven't, if the medical conditions listed aren't very exciting, there's not a lot. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on the doctors. Those things can cause a lot slower growth. So we might recommend multiple phases. We still are going to build out the entire building, but we're going to open in different phases. So anyway, you just want to talk about this, and then you want to mention it at this point if you're procuring the real estate. All right, after that, we've got next steps. So we're going to convey the deadlines, informing the state and local regulatory bodies of intent to purchase, things like that. There's something called significant progress, and this is addressed at every state in some fashion. You're going to be required to be up and operational, and there's a lot of pressure for that. So there are different ways along the way that we can mark significant progress. And so that is something that needs to be addressed, and we'll be mindful of that. The worst case scenario that we've seen is in the state of Pennsylvania, where they said you need to be up and operational within 6 months of actually winning your license. So we'll find out in June, and then we have 6 months from that point. And I mean 6 months to build this massive facility. Architectural plans can take a couple of months. You're in a union state where you're dealing with union labor and things like that, and we have a good plan in place, and our clients are confident there. But man, 6 months is a very, very tight window, and so hopefully at that point we'll either prove some type of at some point we're operational at some level of the massive facility that we're building. We're operational, and that gets us a pass to the other time. But it would really, really have to be perfectly falling in place to get started late June, and then go with that deadline. Because once they notify you that you have won the license, man, then you got to really move. Okay, so the next section of this is the industry overview. So you talk about another landmark year for legal cannabis. You're just talking about the market here and giving them information about it. This might seem like, oh, they can just Google this and do that, or they can call ArcView or New Frontier and they can pull this data, pay a couple $1,000s and get information that way. But this is relevant. It's don't be afraid to put this in. You want to paint the picture for the regulators, and the other thing is you're educating the regulators to a certain extent. They don't have cannabis experience, so doing a quick industry overview is not a waste of time. You talk about the $7.2 billion market. That's how much was spent on cannabis and cannabis-related products in 2016. You just want to show here that you have an understanding of national sales numbers. You talk about 29 states allow for medical cannabis, and 8 states, including D.C., allow for adult use. Projections, you want to give a little projection of what the market might look like, and you want to pull data from other states and do that. We do this really well because we were in the very beginning. We got started when Colorado was medicinal. Remember, we got the very first recreational license in the world, but we also were operating under medical. And so we had the numbers for what looks like on the cultivation side, and we have the numbers for what it really truly looks like on the dispensary side for how these programs develop. Right? You can't look at Colorado numbers right now and compare it to Arkansas. You really want to compare more other states that are of the same size and how those programs move along. Arkansas, I will say, has so much exciting things going on with it and such a friendly climate that you really can't. I would just kind of keep that comparison by itself, and because what's impressive about it is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of restrictions on conditions and things like that, and so we expect doctors to be writing prescriptions and those things to move quickly. All right, so we handle the industry overview. The next thing is you're going to set up your entity. This is something we will advise clients on immediately, very early in the process. The entity can it doesn't have to be the brand. Okay, don't be confusing that. You can do business as, and you can corporate structure can be done a bunch of different ways. You can also bring in an investor and create a new operating agreement. There are a lot of stuff you can do. You can be in a master services agreement. You can be in different levels of partnership. So don't feel like when I'm asking you to set up your entity that I'm asking you to create your brand. Those are two different things. You'll add your personal addresses here, business addresses, and individual components. You have entity ID numbers, company logos, trademarks, or identifying markers. You have a location reference to identify where the proposed facility will be. This is where you want to do your due diligence here. You don't want to be disqualified because you're 1,500 feet on the dispensary side, or you're 3,000 feet close to something on the cultivation side. References there, you'll put those in there. The next step here is you're going to talk about state and local jurisdiction factors. Provisional license, the issuance of a cultivation license does not permit the licensee to cultivate MMJ until the license passes pre-operational inspection. That is pretty standard. You just want to make sure you're talking about that. Okay, so the next thing you're going to address the governing bodies. So you have cultivation and dispensary are going to be regulated through the Arkansas Department of Health, the Arkansas Alcohol Beverage Control. And you might think, well, why is alcohol involved in this? Look, these are established, regulators are looking for something they're familiar with, just like investors are looking for something that they're familiar with. So I think it's wonderful that Alcoholic Beverage Control is in there. Regulate it, tax it like alcohol. That's a great start, right? It's a tremendous start. It ends and resulted in more than $200 million in taxes and fees being given directly to the state of Colorado. Some $40 million went right to schools, carved out the front. $14 million was assigned by the governor to affordable housing. Just really a lot of great things happening there. So however that comes about, alcohol and beverage control are involved there. And then MMC 27 is a medical marijuana commission, which is called there. And I'm going to go over a quick note on this page here. So it just, on MMC 27, it just talks specifically about your ability to operate a business, so including but not limited to education, knowledge, and experience. And here it kind of outlines your regulated industries, commercial manufacturing, creating, implementing a business plan. It starts going through all these things that we're expecting from you, both on the cultivation side and operating the dispensary, being in compliance there. All right, so it says the commission shall consider the following, and then I just said ability to operate a business, including but not limited to education, knowledge, and experience with regulated industries. We talked about agriculture and horticulture. What we typically will do is someone will call us in after we write the application for them, then we'll talk about different steps and ways to operate for them. One of the options is for us to come in for the first 90 days to hire and train and open for you and get everybody situated. At that point, we'll be pulling people from the agricultural industries and horticultural industries to make sure that you have success. In some cases, we'll send people from Colorado to come out and get you open and running, train your employees, and then at that point, you'll have a choice of either running it yourself or enlisting us to go ahead and operate for you. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about permissible use. Permissible use are the conditions that are allowed here. So this is what I'm most excited about and I'm most grateful for in the state of Arkansas, because this is an indication that things are going to go very, very well. So permissible use, you have AIDS, you have cancer, you have glaucoma, hepatitis C, PTSD, very important, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, I have no idea what that is, I'll be honest with you. Tourette's syndrome, good to know. Crohn's disease, very, very important. A known, there's no cure for that, and people are using it all over the world. I had an outstanding guest last year from Israel, actually flew over and was working with the Knesset there, and he was one of the very first people to walk in and actually educate those lawmakers about Crohn's disease and the lack of treatment and the positive sides of cannabis for him. So I'm glad to see Crohn's disease on there. Fibromyalgia, also. Alzheimer's disease, outstanding that that's included. General wasting away and malnutrition, very important because everyone knows that THC stimulates appetite, and that's been wonderful and to help people who are dealing with cancer. So peripheral neuropathy, wonderful, wonderful way. This will expand into really a lot of ways. And once clinical trials come about, man, it's really going to be exciting. Another thing I love about Arkansas, intractable pain, okay, which is pain that has not responded to ordinary medications. And I think it's worth noting here that you're not required to try all available pain medications before being approved. We have seen this happen in a couple of states where they're like, hey, man, give them every opioid in the book and document that they're not working. What a sad, tragic way to go about treating people who are in pain. So that is awesome that you don't have to go through that. And hey, if the cannabis works for you at certain levels, I mean, if you're talking about opioids and you're making a switch to that, if you have to take opioids every day and it's not because you're addicted to them, it's just because you actually need them for pain, there's a gap between what the opioid does for you and what marijuana does for you. And the dosages need to be strong and they need to be appropriate. So that would be a process. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing, but it would be a process for you to get started. Maybe you're looking at a situation where your doctor agrees that you're going to take opioids sometimes and supplement, and you kind of work that way. So however that goes for you. Persistent muscle spasms are also included, also multiple sclerosis, which is wonderful. Seizures, epilepsy, well-known, well-documented cases of kids being helped with that. Severe nausea, also. Severe pain. So I want to stop here because severe pain, chronic pain, this is where the tipping point on the business end of things happen for these industries. So the doctor no longer has to prove that you have AIDS or prove you have cancer. I mean, those are things that are obviously you either have it or you don't. Glaucoma, hepatitis C, those things are difficult. Post-traumatic stress syndrome is wonderful because it is when soldiers come home, that's just a well-known diagnosis, and they can follow that and they can predict that. PTSD also, I want to say that I'm not going to take away from any soldier's experience, and I don't mean to compare what they go through in war versus what people domestically here deal with if your parents were mean to you or whatever happened. But I want to say that PTSD is diagnosed as well for non-combatants, and that's a good way for doctors to say, look, I don't quite understand what's wrong, but they're highly stressed, and that's where cannabis come into play. So PTSD is a big moment, wonderful condition that takes a lot of pressure off of doctors. Severe pain is the other one because chronic pain is something just not going away. Maybe you've gone and done 20 or 30 chiropractic adjustments, it's just not working for you, and you introduced 5 milligrams of cannabis, and that allows you to simply just take away a little bit of the pain and function throughout your day. So really good. The other thing I love about Arkansas is additional conditions are subject to approval by the Arkansas Department of Health. Yes, the Department of Health is involved, but here they can say they can add different conditions, which is wonderful. I remember in the state of Colorado, it's written in our Constitution. We just got PTSD through, and you would think that would have been one of the first things to have happen. One of the massive benefits of having it written in your state constitution is that it's difficult to change, and one of the disadvantages is it's difficult to add conditions. All right, so moving forward onto this, guys, we're 45 minutes in. I want to kind of get through the rest of this for you. Permissible products, so all forms of ingestible cannabis. If you're thinking about investing in Arkansas, that's wonderful. Flowers available, vapors, oils, waxes, marijuana combined, prepared with edibles and drinks. There are House bills on the floor that we're trying to go back and forth about this. Look, if something comes up and it changes whether or not you can mix it into the drink or whether or not you can infuse it, I mean, there are ways to consume it. I just want to, the overarching point here is that there are a lot of positives from the business standpoint here. You don't have restrictions that, like, say, Pennsylvania had, where they don't even allow flower yet. So flower as an idea, even though you have other markets that are moving quickly and you can pull this data and see that edibles and everything are making steam, but man, flower is still king right now as we're speaking in 2017. It's still 60% of your revenue. Current sales limits. So we're looking at examples here. 2.5 ounces of usable cannabis. That's your sales limit. That also is phenomenal. We had an ounce here in Colorado. You guys are starting with 2.5 ounces. So really good signs. All right, territories. You want to provide an overview in this section of how the territories are set up, how they're broken down: county, district, city, population. you want to kind of cover that. We talked a little bit about the 8 and the 5 there, how that's going to work, and how each one will be, each dispensary will go into each geographic location. Cultivation done similar, so be mindful of that, and we'll talk about territories and how that's broken up. Window of opportunity. So you want to talk about when applications are available, note that this is happening, when the application actually gets released, and then when it's due. So you have restrictions there, and you want to talk about that. For example, cultivations now, typical for dispensaries to follow a couple of months after that. That makes sense, right, guys? You're talking about a 4-month lead time between the seeds in the ground to the first harvest, so they let the dispensaries follow there. That's natural. All right, and then obviously in Arkansas, you have the option to cultivate and have a dispensary as well. So you can cultivate with a limited plant count there and without having to get the license there. All right. Okay, I see that. ALS question there. What is going on? Okay. Hey, I'm having technical difficulties with the question there. I saw the question about ALS. I'll see if we can. Okay, there it goes. Really going quickly. For some reason, I'm having a delay, guys. I'll keep going. I don't want to keep our listeners waiting. So on the webinar, if you'll email me that question, or it should pop up right now. I think we have a little bit of a delay. So moving forward, window of opportunity. We'll cover that. And then what other factors will come into play with the window of opportunity? You want to address that. You're just proving at this point to the regulators that you know what's going on in the market. Application overview is next. So the basis of license, it's a merit-based application based on points. Non-resident ownership, we've talked a little bit about that. Remember, you need to be 60%, you need to be owner there, which is wonderful. You want to talk about the criteria that's allowed there. Remember, we talked about residents, and we also talked about who's going to own that. So license duration and renewal, there are specific dates that are set out in the regulations. You just want to talk about that and know when those are. That'll renew every year, and there's a fee for that, so you want to look into that. The beautiful part about the renewal is you already have revenue coming in, and it's never an issue for you to spend $100,000 or so to renew your $24 million cannabis cultivation center. So not a big deal there, and understandably a fee that needs to be paid. So taxes, you want to talk about the city and state taxes next, and as they relate to wholesale and retail. Political factors. Political factors are a harsh reality, but be aware of that and get involved. I remember in Ohio, we're just writing that application now, we had to talk about what role our client played in the progression and the moving forward of the cannabis industry. I mean, that was an actual question saying, what have you done as a part of this? And wow, we would love to have an answer of community involvement and different factors there. So be mindful of that. We're lucky in that we have lobbyists in place in each of these states, and we're connected there, and we're working there long before the program gets ready and gets released. We're making inroads, and there's a lot of, and in many cases, frankly, we're advising and helping set up the program. So that's not uncommon for regulators to seek outside help, and so as a part of that, we would love to have written in your application how you were involved, or share our experience of how we're involved and let you collaborate in that way as a partnership there. But don't ignore that, the fact that you need to be involved politically. Community outreach is another big thing. The big thing here, guys, just do more than you think you should. I talk about this a couple of times, but we had this embarrassing situation when Pueblo, Colorado came up. A church had an issue there and was lobbying and interested, and there was enough community interest and support behind that church or in it or through it or somehow that that they wanted to do away with cultivation in Pueblo. So a bill actually made it up, and that's frightening because Pueblo is sort of like a Humboldt County. I mean, it is where the majority, about 70% of the wholesale market cannabis is grown, and so it's a big deal. So it would have been a tremendous blow and a nod, frankly, to the black market. It would have been a disaster to have that happen. So community outreach is in the beginning. It's a plan of how you're going to do it in the beginning, but it's also an ongoing actual thing that is about involvement and educating people in the industry. I had the pleasure of speaking to a lot of well-meaning folks that are very serious about the medicinal side of marijuana and the optics of it and wanting to do it right. I do believe they're sincere. I think they oftentimes will underestimate the fact that they are simply a representative of the industry, whether they like it or not. You know, a lot of people sheepishly get in this industry because they want the money and they love that, but they don't want it to be, you know, they don't want anybody, you know, in the community to know that they're involved with it. And so there's ways around that, and we structure different real estate deals to make them landlords and do some things like that to help them. But at the end of the day, they're to protect that business, which is what they really want to do. You stay in the community and you continue to educate and show people that this is what the face of cannabis looks like. Here's what I look like. It is medication to me. It makes sense. I've used it to replace my opioids, or my kid no longer takes Ritalin because of this and that, or however you're working it. They can see you, and you are an advocate in the community. All right. Next up, we'll talk about the market size. Here, you're just going to talk about the history of the market, what the potential is, where you might land up in 2020. You can pull different sources online, and there are a lot of estimates there. And you want to talk about the growth percentage. And here, you're just proving that you're aware of what's happening in the market. Your potential customer base. This is very, very important. So what you're going to do, and this goes back to the original financial projections in the business plan that we created for you in the very beginning. That even if you didn't use us as a consultant, as an operator, you've taken this. And this program, this thing what I'm talking about is basically a 25-page deal, and it talks about the growth and shows your investors and shows the regulators how this program is going to go. And so what's going to happen, and how the patient count as a representation of the percentage of the population, how that's reasonably going to grow, and how your market share can be expected. In some cases, this is pretty easy because on the retail side, you're basically in a geographic area, you're restricted that way. But in cultivation, you're allowed to sell across the state, and there's potential as other cultivation centers struggle. A wholesale deal will happen, you know, 100 miles apart. But obviously, the retail customer is going to want to be somewhere around their house. They're going to want to do some things. So you have your restrictions there. But understand what that patient count is, how it relates, and how it's going to grow. And if you get this patient count wrong as a percentage of the population and what your market is, all of your numbers are going to be wrong back there. And guess who's going to be really upset? Your investor, who you promised all these numbers for, and you're not delivering. So very important from the investment standpoint. But this is just pretty much comes down to knowing your numbers. All right. Now we're talking about potential demand. So you have low resident patient ratios. You want to talk about that. You want to address tourism if that's happening. Not a ton of tourism in Arkansas, so no big deal there. Resident requirements here, you're just addressing this. You need to be 7 years in the state of Arkansas, 60% ownership. The good news about this 7 years is you don't have to turn over 7 years of tax returns. You can prove this with 7 years of voter registration or vehicle registration for 7 years, and you want to talk about that. So you talk about residence requirements here. Further potential demand, you want to talk about considering the source, that has been fact-checked. We will often, definitely, I love what ArcView does. We love what New Frontier does. We support pretty much anybody that we feel like is moving the industry forward in any way. But there are sometimes we'll get data. So, for example, some of these organizations, you're getting data reported to them, and so they go to the dispensary and say, hey, give us your data, what's happening. And either that person turns over these books or doesn't, or there's issues with that. So you want to consider the source, because in rare instances we'll actually disagree with some data, and we'll say, look, this is what's published publicly, but here's our actual data and how this actually comes out from our 9 dispensaries that we manage. Here's what happens with them, and here's how this program is going to progress, and here are the real numbers. And that can be off by several $million in profit. So you have to watch that, and you have a responsibility to your investors, and you have a responsibility to these regulators to paint the picture of what this market's going to be like. All right, this can be expensive, of course, but you want to know what it is. Anybody who's purchased our opportunity assessment, $10,000, we have saved them, and not only have helped our clients raise around $16 million doing that, but we save them a ton of money up front, and they know in the very beginning to go and negotiate how much capital they need, because you don't want to renegotiate once you run out, because then obviously if your investor doesn't just pull out of the deal and foreclose on you, they're going to offer you some terms that aren't necessarily favorable. All right, at the end of this, we do an analysis. We do a strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is very straightforward, marketing 101. For us, STRAINWISE Consulting, we use a SWOT analysis to further vet the opportunity. This is a standard planning method that evaluates 4 elements of the business venture. So the only thing I want to say about this analysis is you've got different sectors here. So you have the market analysis, right? So you have what's going on in the local market. So you have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on the local market. You have the same thing on the nationwide, statewide market, and then you have the nationwide market as well. Then you want to talk about your analysis of yourself, of your internal team. And so you're being honest and upfront about where your gaps are. By this point, we've already identified, if we're a consultant for you writing this application, we've already identified the gaps in your team, and we help you fill those in. Whether we fill those in with partners, people in the state that we already know that are interested and motivated by this, we filled in that team for you, so your team doesn't look as lack of a better word, weak. I was looking for a fancier word than that, and I could not find it. So, but basically, you want to look at that and make sure that you're addressing those situations. The most overlooked thing I see on this SWOT analysis when people try to do it on their own is that they don't talk about the political realities. So that can be a mess. Obviously, conservative governor, but I've said this a couple times throughout this webinar, but I want to tell you that they have done a fantastic job in Arkansas. If you're an Arkansas resident and you're looking to get in this business, you should be very excited. I talked about the 4 things to be grateful for in the very beginning, but man, this state is going to go really, really well, and it's going to be an outstanding example of what can happen in the South. So very exciting stuff. You compare Arkansas to Florida. Florida's a nightmare. It's an absolute disaster. It is the worst example of crony capitalism we've seen in a long, long time. It's embarrassing. Yet 70% of the people have approved that by vote, and it's a horrible situation. But most importantly, patients don't have medicine there is the end result, and that is a huge surprise to me. As we started looking at it and following it, we were doing seminars out there, and we're ready to go. I mean, we're well connected and ready to go there, but the opposite of Arkansas, guys. So be grateful that you're in Arkansas. All right, so the next up, we do the financial analysis here. We utilize a financial analysis tool to provide revenue forecasts. Here we talk about ROI, tax generation, etc. Gets really boring. Don't fall asleep on me, but you got cash flow. You got for the grow and the retail. You got cumulative cash flow, combined cumulative cash flow, cumulative discounted cash flow, and you have cash flow projections. If you're still awake, you can find this stuff online, but you got to get the numbers and you got to get real data. Recommendation and next steps. So we use this section to make recommendations about whether or not the client should proceed with their application, and if so, in what format. You might think, why would you recommend not proceed? Lack of capital, lack of experience. No operator. Let me get this straight. You don't have the capital you need, you don't know how to build this, and you don't want an operator. Okay, our recommendation is that you do not go into this business. Or you say, I've got the capital, we're going to build it out ourselves. Okay, well, how many marijuana cultivation centers have you built before? 0. All right, well, let us lay it out for you. And here is something I will say that where we're distinctly different is that we're going to do a layout during the application process for you. Okay? Hey guys, no, I won't be in the conference in DC next week. I'm headed to New York and Oakland, and so in June, and we have a full week there. So Frank, thanks for your question. Aaron Phillips, our CEO, might be there. I'm not going to be there personally. I'm going to be in different places. All right, so we were talking about next steps and recommendations. So the advantage to the application. So when we are doing the application for you, we're going to do a layout that actually shows you what it should look like. So even if you say, all right, we want to hire STRAINWISE Consulting to the application, that is, we can't do all those narratives, 10,000 words, whatever it is, we do that. But then you say, all right, we don't want to do design and build out. Great. Here's the layout. We'll give it to you. We'll do a little bit of work for you. We're not going to manage the construction process, and it's going to be a brutal thing. But understand that you can still have it done. You can still use our layout. And why we give that to clients, most consultants are going to charge for that. We give that to you because we want to be your operator later on, and I don't want to come in and try to operate a facility that you designed because you have no idea what you're doing. So that's a nightmare for us, and we don't want to do it, and it strains our employees. If you've got an employee walking an extra mile a day because the layout is horrible, or you don't have a good percentage of veg to flowering rooms, things that are just basic, that makes it very, very difficult, and we might turn you down and decline to work with you because we don't want to run a cultivation center that is structured like that. Okay, so after we handle the recommendation and next steps, we say, are any changes being suggested to the client's original plans? If so, or why? We talk about this because implementation is different than theory. This is most common when people are doing research in the beginning and they're looking at different extraction methods and things like that, and they start looking at actual cost and what's going to happen. So it's not uncommon for along those lines to change. There are subtle differences, but mostly we try to write this application exactly how it's going to be run, and we want to. It's the beginning of our relationship with you, and we're setting up this application, getting to know you, and telling your story, and setting and going over all the facets. Most people are just blown away by how much is involved in this application and what happens with it, and what actually when they see, oh my gosh, here's all the facets that are happening. Here are all the people we need to hire, and this is what it really looks like to run what is a cannabis manufacturing facility, which is really what you're looking at when you're talking about 5 cultivation centers. You're going to be basically Anheuser-Busch of Arkansas to start off with, and you need to be prepared to serve in that market. So very big stuff, a lot that gets involved, but a great start getting that application done. All right, so then we will actually respond to the SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is useless without a plan to respond to the findings. Let me give you an example. We look at your team, we find some weaknesses there, and we identify your strengths. We're going to highlight that. That's wonderful. Opportunities and threats. We look at that, and we take action by making your team stronger. On the political side, we go ahead and make those connections, make those introductions for you, so that you are shown in a good light there. So that might be, simply taking action to make those introductions and make that happen, connecting you that way, filling in certain people on your board to strengthen the application. That's not uncommon. Then we'll look at other threats that might be inefficiencies you might have. If you don't have an operator, we're going to be the operator for you, or we're going to help you find another operator, but that absolutely has to be addressed. If we recognize in the SWOT analysis that you have a weakness because you have no operator and we just overlook it, then that's not good. Don't do that. All right, so then we make an operational recommendation. So what kind of recommendations are we giving out? Are you going to be an absentee owner? Do you do a 2-year operating contract or a 5-year operating contract? Most people that sign up for an operating contract, they're in this business for the profit of it. When they find out what it's like to actually be in a cultivation center for 8 to 12 hours a day, that's not their cup of tea. They're not interested in that. They want to hire operators. They want to make sure it's going well. So most people will start a cultivation center with us, and then the first thing they'll ask once we get up and running is, okay, where's the next state that we can go into? We love that. We love the nationwide model, but you will have an option to maybe things are going well and you decide, hey, we want to scale back. Life happens, things slow down. Your $25 million in revenue is enough, and you want to scale things down, and so you're thinking, all right, I only want to use an operator for the first couple of years to teach me the business, and then at that point you can step out. So you've got a bunch of different options there. Most common thing that we see is truly an absentee owner. In the state of Arkansas, most of the groups that we're chatting with are there's a lot of concern and self-consciousness about public perception of marijuana, so we understand that. Then we talk about expected outcomes there, and basically based on our recommendations, what do we think the operational and financial outcomes will be? Very important. This is where we summarize the financial and operation outcomes, especially if we've recommended something different, right? We want to show, look, originally we're going to do this, we're going to use this type of extraction equipment, we're going to follow this method, oops, ran out of capital, or we don't see that it's going to be, the ROI is a little slower than we thought, so we're going to flip that, use a totally different type of extraction method, and save some money or do some different things that way. So we want to just highlight this. This shows the regulators that we've thought this thing through, and it also shows your investors that you're well prepared. All right, so the next steps there, we're going to secure the real estate. Understand that you need an entity formed and you need a piece of real estate, okay? So if the situation comes down in Arkansas where they tell you need to be operational in 6 months, just like they did in Pennsylvania, and you're building from scratch, guess when construction needed to start? About 5 months before that. So you're late to the party if you're building from scratch and you need somebody designing and laying that out. You need to be in touch with architects. You need to do that. There is a risk. You don't know if you're going to win your license. But if you're with somebody like us that has nearly 100% success rate and you've got the right person writing your application, whether it's our company or someone else in the space, then take that next step. There are steps along the way where we can help you write these plans, get you designed and build out ready, start formulating your team of architects, general contractor, and subcontractor, getting all that stuff laid out, and and talking to the permit division, and talking to the city and county, getting everything laid out. You don't just go from the day that you said, all right, we want our license. It doesn't happen that way. Architects don't move that fast. The construction process is long and slow and tedious and involved. So if you're building from scratch, you need to get going well ahead of time, and you can do a lot of stuff that's not very expensive. If you have questions about that, just shoot me an email. All right. Securing real estate, you can purchase obviously there. If you're talking about leasing, you want to address current vacancy rates here, and you want to talk about, does the property meet the needs of the opportunity, as well as state and local requirements? Meaning, is this a great building to cultivate in? We have converted almost every type of building under the sun. We've learned a lot of tough lessons. There are issues with buildings. You want to steer clear. In the state of California, we've completely eliminated any future purchase of any building that has been a Jiffy Lube or has been a mechanic shop or any kind of things, due to the climate in California. The regulatory climate there says we will not take that risk, because what happens more often is they'll discover something that is down there, a tank being buried or something, or oil or things down there, that you all of a sudden now you've got $1 million environmental bill coming up. So you want to address that and talk about needs of the opportunity. So we want to make sure that what we love to do is take a look at the property and tell you, at least walk the property and tell you this is why it's going to work for cultivation, this is why it's not. So you need somebody looking at that, and they don't need to be nickel and diming you and charging you for every little service. You just, it helps us to help you get ready to cultivate, because again, we want to operate for you. So if we are quiet and sit on the sidelines, and someone's trying to design a cultivation center, or they're trying to use a building that's not going to work, then that's a problem. Not working, I could do a whole massive webinar on just real estate mistakes and things like that. Not working can include just not being prepared. Not overlooking the fact that you need to drop a false ceiling down there, moving sprinkler heads down, not anticipating the flow and the understanding of security and how things are going to happen with the building. There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of reasons to say no. Don't panic in Arkansas. You guys have plenty of land and plenty of property. Okay, it's kind of like Texas in the way that you're okay. You can make it happen. Nothing like California, where everything's stacked on top of each other, and it's a absolute seller's market there. So totally different. Nothing to worry about. But you just want to make sure that you've designed this intelligently, and you're smartly using your own capital or your investor's capital. You also want to talk about setbacks. Make sure we've talked about that. Make sure you're meeting setbacks there. The full details of the purchase, guys, must be attached to the assessment and included in financial projections. Next step then is license acquisition. So you're going to know the deadlines and time frame to prepare for that. Has your consultant had success in competitive markets? You want to ask them that. When you only have 5 licenses being issued, that is very, very competitive. So first thing you want to ask your competitor is, competitor. You want to ask your consultant, what have you done? Where have you won? Colorado, that's great. We won the very first recreational license in the world. Proud of that. Colorado is not a competitive state. Maryland is a competitive state. Pennsylvania is a competitive state. Ohio, very competitive. So you want to ask these consultants, where are you and where are you winning, and talk about your success. After that, you want to engage STRAINWISE Consulting to manage your application process. All right, guys, we are near the end. I've kind of talked about what's happening there. I'm gonna put my contact information here. I hope this was very helpful to you, and I will go through a couple of pictures here. There's my contact information. Feel free to shoot me an email. I will take one more question. Frank Pizzera, good to see you on here, buddy. Releasing the RFP for seed to sale tray system by the end of the month. They are really going quickly. Yeah. So that question is on the seed to sale tray system. They will announce that ideally. I actually don't know who. I'm sure BioTrack has got their name in that hat, and I'm sure that MJ Freeway. So that will happen. Unrelated. So what that question is for you guys that are listening is that basically is talking about who's going to handle the seed to sale. That's awesome, because if for example, if BioTrack wins it, they'll win the state contract, and then you can choose to use them as a platform. We use BioTrack. We think they're great, but there are certainly other services as well out there. And so ideally, you typically will see, I think for those seed to sale platforms, you'll see whoever gets a state contract typically will utilize that, because those platforms will talk to each other a little better. So anyway, hey guys, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. I hope this has been a wonderful experience for you. Bottom line here, this is a lot of stuff. You're talking about more than 20 narratives there. If I can help you with either the business plan for $10,000, or we can write the application for you for frankly a little bit more than that, whether it's cultivation or retail, we want to help you. If we can license our brand to you on the retail side of things, we're happy to do that for you as well. Thank you all so much for joining me today on this webinar. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to upload this. We will have it on the YouTube channel, and also available anytime. You guys that have sat on the webinar, you can log back in and hear this anytime. So hope it was helpful. You all guys have a wonderful day.